Hey everyone, welcome back to round 4 of the Dubai Rapid Tournament. If you watch the first 3 games, you'll know that I started with 3 wins. My opponent's progressively getting stronger as I win more games. And in round 4, I'm playing an International Master with a rating of 2067, which is a little bit low rated for an IM, but the tournament was using rapid ratings, so that could have something to do with it. And going into this game, I knew my opponent was a French defense player. Again, I had time to find my opponent's chess.com username beforehand and find out generally what openings my opponent plays. And I knew to expect e4 and e6. And I was debating what to go for because there's a lot of different things I can play against the French between mainline Tarrasch, the 2 knights attack, the exchange variation, the wing gambit, which is knight f3, this, and b4. There's b3, which is kind of an interesting sideline. But I decided that I would go for an opening, which I've actually never played over the board, which is an Orthoschnapp Gambit. And this opening starts with c4, d5, cd5, ed5, and queen b3. And before maybe about a year ago, this line was virtually unknown. But it actually all started with Jonathan Schrantz, who's a fellow chess YouTuber. He made a video covering this variation. And then I adopted this variation to play in my streams and Blitz and Bullets. And it's a surprisingly interesting and venomous line, especially against French defense players who normally like closed and more kind of methodical positional games. This is a line to guarantee a more open and tactical battle, which French defense players may not be so comfortable with. So first of all, this is a gambit. White is sacrificing a pawn. My opponent accepted the gambit by taking. The alternative for black here is to play knight f6, after which I would play e5, and if knight e4, I would play d4, and we would get maybe a structure that resembles more of a French. But after pawn takes pawn, the game changes style, and now it's up to white to try and improve compensation. And I go for bishop c4, developing with tempo, creating the battery against f7 pawn. And here black has to do something a little bit awkward to defend the pawn. There's really not too many options other than moving the queen either to f6, e7, or d7. Now I should note queen f6 walks into knight c3, after which white has more initiative, and this is already looking very pleasant for white. So the 2 main moves here are queen e7 and queen d7. Opponent played queen e7, which is a very fine move. I continue, knight to c3, and now knight f6, a very natural move. I should note here an alternative for black is to play c6. And I'll admit I haven't studied like too many specific Orthoschnapp lines, I just know basic ideas. But one line to know is c6, with the idea of trying to target the bishop. And after this, I would play pawn to d3, accepting the fact that black can trap the bishop. But if b5, there's a nice idea to takes, and bishop d5, and white is winning back some material with the rook attacked. There are some lines to further investigate, like bishop b7, queen b5, but white is coming back here, and there's less to worry about. So my opponent didn't go for c6, instead went for knight f6, and I still play d3. And the point of d3 is to temporarily sacrifice another pawn, and if black were to take it, white can continue with accelerating development, already ready to castle queenside. And okay, this pawn's a goner, and if white can have such nice development and win back the pawn, meanwhile black is very underdeveloped, very slow to get the king castled. There should be enough compensation here. Instead, what happened in the game, my opponent played knight to c6, clearly aiming for some knight move to exploit the placement of my queen. I take back, and here my opponent plays knight d4, which turned out to be another kind of slight mistake given my next move. What black should do here is take the pawn, and I wouldn't be able to take back because after takes, g2 would be hit, and some knight e5 move could be coming. So I would play bishop e3. Here, the engine actually gives a big plus for black after knight c5. So things could have gone very bad for me very quickly if my opponent played a few accurate moves in the opening. That's one of the risks with playing such a gambit, is it could backfire. But opponent didn't play perfectly, played knight d4, and now after queen a4, there's a few things for black to worry about. And my opponent pretty quickly played bishop d7, probably missing my tactical idea is to exploit the knight on d4. It's an undefended piece, aligned with my queen. And I was very happy to snag the pawn on f7. And after king f7, queen d4, even though I'm the one who played the gambit, I'm actually up a pawn here because I won back the pawn on e4 and now won the pawn on f7. And things get really bad for black really quickly from here. So instead of bishop d7, my opponent should have seen the danger and played a move like queen d7. And from here, okay, the game is still very much a fight. But what happened? Okay, I won the pawn, won the knight. Opponent plays rook to e8, trying to pressure the e-file. I simply develop. And here my opponent made a very, very bad blunder and took the pawn. Even though there are 3 attackers and only 2 defenders, when black takes the pawn, I take back and the queen is overworked. The queen is busy defending the bishop, and there's not really time to take my knight because the bishop would be hanging. So after takes, white is just up a clean piece here. My opponent realized this and was clearly just disappointed at the board. Black just gave away a knight for a pawn, and from here the game ended in just a few more moves. Opponent went for bishop to c6, targeting the diagonal, trying to create some counterplay, but I have some initiative of my own. I start with queen c4, hitting the king. There's not a great way to get out of check. If queen e6, I put the hammer down with a fork on g5. So black here had to play king g6. And here I very simply move back to c3, realizing that if bishop takes g2, I can then play queen g4 and pick off the bishop. So after knight c3, everything is pretty much covered for whites. Opponent tried queen b4, but I was happy to trade queens. And here, even though my pawn is still attacked, I'm able to defend it with tactics and play knight to e2, making it so black can't take it, because if bishop g2, I actually have the option of pinning or forking. So the pawn is untouchable, and my opponent actually resigned in this position. White's just up a clean piece. Black doesn't even have a pawn for it. And yeah, from here it would be a pretty simple conversion. So that was my round 4 game. Out of all the games up until this point, this is probably the easiest game, the shortest game, won in just 17 moves. So I was feeling pretty good to start the tournament with 4 out of 4. So I hope you enjoyed this one. It was a bit quicker than usual, but hopefully there's a lesson or two to take away. And stay tuned for my round 5 game. I don't want to give too much away, but in round 5, I do play Grandmaster, top seed, and we fought for the lead in the tournament. So stay tuned for that. Be sure to like and subscribe. And of course, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.